Syracuse added a couple of players to its roster in the transfer portal yesterday, and more players could be on the way.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in a Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. That's Mike McAllister, publisher for Syracuse over on 24/7 Sports. And thank you so much for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And of course, we're always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are talking all things Syracuse football in the transfer portal, the needs that they have in the portal, players that they could be pursuing. The offensive line is certainly a question mark for Syracuse, but so far they haven't been publicly connected to any offensive linemen. But perhaps Mike could give us some more info on the offensive line, so stick around later on the show for that. Quarterback targets. There are many players that Syracuse is going after the quarterback position. Who are they going to get? But first and foremost, let's start off with the two players that Syracuse got yesterday in the portal on Thursday afternoon and Thursday evening. Let's start with Cole Weaver, a Miami, Ohio receiver. This broke on Wednesday evening, 6'5", 220 pounds, had over 600 receiving yards last season. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time here to join Locked On Syracuse. How does Syracuse plan on using Cole Weaver?
Well, first, I think it's very impressive that Locked On knows that all of its listeners, it's the first to. The fact that you're tapped into your audience like that, you know this is the first thing they're listening to, is very impressive. But he's interesting because he's 6'5". And so I've kind of wondered, are they going to use him as kind of like similar to what they did with Gadsden, right? Where he was kind of a big slot. Are they going to do some of those types of things? I don't think they're going to use him in the same way because Gadsden, once Fran Brown came in, they really worked with him on his blocking. And so he did some of the traditional tight end stuff, lining up along the line of scrimmage, tight to the offensive line, doing some blocking. Even if that wasn't his main strength, he was definitely working on that, and they kept him in the game to do some of those things. With Cole Weaver, I don't think you're going to see that he's going to be used as a traditional tight end, but I could see them with some of the same route concepts that they used with Oronde Gadsden, him able to use his size and his body. But then I think they'll put him outside at times as well. He's interesting because you mentioned he had over 600 yards. He only had one touchdown. And I think that, along with, 40-something catches, is going to make some people say, you got a guy from the MAC with 40 catches and one touchdown. Okay. But you have to dig a little bit deeper. And his quarterback situation at Miami of Ohio was not great. And so he was productive despite that. So I think if you put him in a where he's got a Steve Angeli throwing to him, he's got the potential to be more productive in an offense that'll be a little bit more pass-friendly, we'll say.
Got you. And so Syracuse has lost a number of receivers, whether it's eligibility or in the transfer portal. Jonte Cook, Darrell Gill. They are getting back Amari Hatcher, who decided to withdraw from the transfer portal. And also they lost Justice Ross Simmons. So how many more receivers, or is Syracuse going to add another wide receiver in the transfer portal on top of Cole Weaver, in your opinion?
I think they could add another one. They've got, I believe, 12 scholarships with the addition of Weaver and Amari Hatcher coming back. I think they've got 12 scholarships allocated to the wide receiver position. So you're not going to go crazy with like 3 or 4 more, right? Because it becomes a numbers game at some point. But I could see them adding one more. I think 2 is probably not going to happen with Hatcher coming back. But I could see them adding someone, especially if they can find someone they think is good enough, someone that's explosive, maybe can stretch the field a little bit, be a little bit different than what Cole Weaver is. I could see them grabbing someone like that. But the thing is, with 12 players at that position, they don't have to get somebody. I know they lost Gill, they lost Cook. You just went through it, right? Ross Simmons, his eligibility is gone. They've got several other guys at the wide receiver position that are in the transfer portal. Manuel Ross, Jalen Hornsby. We could go through the list. But again, they've got 12 guys there, and I know they really liked Tyshawn Russell and thought he was going to be a good player for them going into last year. And then he got hurt early in the season. We saw flashes of Darian Williams, and Fran Brown talked him up at several points during the season. So I know they really like him. And so you've got some of these guys, and then you've got a junior college guy in Zamondre Merriweather that I think is a little bit forgotten in this whole thing. When you get a JUCO guy, it's almost similar to getting someone from the transfer portal in that you're getting someone multiple years removed from high school. So his body has matured a bit, and he's got experience at the JUCO level playing and was productive there. So I think that helps them. And then, of course, we know Calvin Russell and Amari Goff and those guys are coming in. So I think they've got enough talent there. But certainly if they can find someone else, they had Corey Milliner from UAB was on campus for a visit. Had a couple others who have ended up committing elsewhere. So it wouldn't surprise me if they added one more, but I think that's probably where the limit is.
Before we get to the running backs and the new addition also from last night, which was Ahmad Miller, I just have to ask you very quickly, is there any, because this is possible in the transfer portal where guys can enter the portal and then decide to come back. I mean, Amari Hatcher literally just did it.
Hatcher just did that.
Yeah. So what about Jonte Cook and Darrell Gill, especially if they're looking for a field stretcher? I think one of those two could certainly fit that bill if they're interested in coming back.
I don't think Cook, I think that ship has sailed. Gill, if Gill called up Fran Brown right now and said, you know what, I think I want to come back. I've gone through the portal. I've looked at my options. Yeah, I could get paid at a couple of spots, but after evaluating them and talking to them about what my role would be, I feel like I'm more comfortable at Syracuse and I'd like to come back. They take him back in a heartbeat. But I think he's probably one of the only ones that they would do that. I think Jameer Thomas is in the portal. He's pretty young. So I think they might take him back if he decided to withdraw. But Gill for sure. I think Cook, I wouldn't count on that.
I agree with you on that with Cook because of Cook and reading everything about that. It would seem to be some sort of contract dispute, so I don't know how it would change between now and then. But anyway, let's move on with running backs here. So Peyton Lewis, he was my number one target in my opinion, but he is off the board. So Syracuse will not have Peyton Lewis. He is headed to Virginia. He's in the ACC. Woohoo. But Syracuse has added a couple of running backs in the portal. Juwan Johnson, who we talked about a couple of days ago here on Locked On Syracuse. He's from LSU. But they also got Ahmad Miller. This happened on Wednesday night. He's from Jackson State. So, Mike, how do you envision Syracuse using both of these backs? Is there a clear lead back, or do you think that they're going to probably go a more committee approach?
So I agree with you. I thought Peyton Lewis was kind of the top dog going into the transfer portal window. But he's from Virginia, and once I knew Virginia was involved, I kind of thought that might be where he'd end up. And turns out that was the case. The other two, Ahmad Miller's a little bit more of the known quantity because he ran for 1,000 yards last year. He's been in college 3 years. He got hurt 2 years ago, so he was able to redshirt that year, and he's got 2 years left. But he ran for 1,000 yards, over 6 yards a carry with a handful of touchdowns last season. So you know a little bit about what he is. Not a ton in terms of being a receiving back, but I think that was more a product of what Jackson State was doing as opposed to him not having that skill set. I look at him and kind of view him similar in terms of LaQuint Allen and in terms of like running style and playing style. Not saying he's going to be that good. We know LaQuint Allen was really good, right? But just in terms of playing style and the type of role that he could have in doing some of those things, blitz pickup, all of that. Juwan Johnson is really a wild card for me, and he's really hard to peg. And the main reason is he's extremely athletic and he's very talented. He was an elite level recruit for a reason. What's interesting about him is he set a lot of Louisiana State records as a quarterback in high school, but then was signed with LSU to play safety. And then they had injuries at the running back position, so they moved him over there, and he ended up sticking at running back. But he was behind a couple of other highly touted running backs, and obviously we know they went through a whole coaching change. And so he decided to look for other opportunities. I think his ceiling is higher than Ahmad Miller's, but his floor might be lower just because even though he ran the ball well in high school as a quarterback, it was as a quarterback. And it's different when you're a running back and you're having the ball handed to you as opposed to snap to you and then you can decide to do whatever you want. The positive is, because he has that experience as quarterback, it makes you wonder if they can do some tricky things with him, right? Do you line him up as a wildcat and now you can run or throw out of that? You can line him up in the backfield, maybe do some flea flicker type stuff. Maybe you can do a toss to him on the outside and have him throw the ball down the field. I think if you want to be creative and play with some of those things and a little bit of backyard football, I think he gives you opportunities to do that. But he's really athletic. He's really fast. And if he can get some of the nuances of the running back position down, I think the 1-2 punch of those two guys, combined with, I know they really like Tyreek Hill and a couple other backs that are there, I think it has the potential to be a deep running back room. And I envision, if that comes to fruition, where they've got 3 or 4 guys that they like, that they're going to rotate those guys and they're all going to get touches throughout the season.
Awesome. And also with Juwan Johnson, maybe an emergency defensive back in case there's a ton of injuries or it's a specific personnel group. I mean, he's versatile, so I'll certainly give him that. And he has upside, and at least Syracuse does have the protection of getting Ahmad Miller as well in the transfer portal. That's Mike McAllister, publisher for Syracuse over on 24/7 Sports. I'm Jackson Holzer here at Locked On Syracuse. Coming up here on this show, we are going to go over the quarterback targets for Syracuse football. Who are they going to get? How many are they going to get? We'll talk about it next on Locked On Syracuse. Let's be real. Managing your money or managing your finances can feel overwhelming between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month. It's easy to feel like you're losing control, and who has time to track every transaction or hunt down hidden fees? That's where Rocket Money comes in, the personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I love how it tracks all my subscriptions and lets me cancel them right in the app with just a few taps. No more hunting down customer service numbers. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/locked-on. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. rocketmoney.com/locked-on. We know that Syracuse football needs probably multiple quarterbacks in the transfer portal. So, Mike, before we even get to names, okay, let's just start there. How many quarterbacks is Syracuse looking to target in the transfer portal?
Well, I think the total number of slots available currently, if you're going by the 105 roster limit, is, I think they're at like 22, 23, somewhere around that range. So just go get 20 quarterbacks. One of them's got to be good.
Right? You don't know that for sure. You can find 20 bad quarterback is the toughest position to play. Yeah. You can find 20 bad ones.
It is. And they played, out after the Angeli injury, they played 3 of them last year, and that didn't work out so well. So I think they're going to take 2 from the transfer portal. They've still got Rich Beelan on the roster. They've still got Filardi on the roster. We know that Angeli's there. They got the kid coming in from North Carolina out of high school. So I think with those guys, and then you bring in 2 from the transfer portal, I think you feel pretty good about the numbers there. But the key is, the challenge is convincing someone that it's a good idea to come in and be a backup when primarily they're in the transfer portal because they don't want to be a backup anymore, or they're trying to move up a level. But you move up a level in order to play, to prove yourself, to try to, better your profile for potentially the next level. So I'm going to go with 2 that I think they're going to get in the transfer portal. That doesn't make it easy, but I think ultimately that's the goal during this transfer portal window.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. And I also want to ask you this question again before we get to the names here, because I've seen rumors circulate online, and you've already had to debunk a couple as well. Is Syracuse going after a big fish quarterback? Like, what's the deal here? Are they going after a big fish, or is it more what we're going to really get into, which is guys who are probably going to come in here and be backups to Steve Angeli?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to get a big fish. Like, I know there's some troll accounts that are photoshopping stuff with Dylan Raiola, right, and having some fun with that. And it's been kind of funny to me how many people have fallen for that. When if you take 30 seconds to look at what they're posting, it's very obvious that it's fake and they're trolling. But either way, I don't foresee that happening, just because those big fishes want to come into a place where they know they're the guy. And unless the plan is for Angeli to sit out this year because of the Achilles injury and not come back until 2027, that doesn't make a lot of sense for that big fish quarterback. Now, of course, Syracuse, yeah, we'd love to have Dylan Raiola come in and back up Steve Angeli. I get it from Syracuse's perspective.
That'd be fantastic.
Right. But realistically, I don't foresee that happening. And everything that Fran Brown has said is that the plan is for Angeli to be the quarterback next year. So having him wait till 2027 doesn't seem like that's a very likely solution either. I think the type of quarterback you're going to get is likely someone from the FCS level, the D2 level, or a non-Power 5 quarterback that has some experience, multiple years of eligibility left, and is willing to potentially sit for a year and learn behind Angeli, hoping that Angeli has a big year so that he can turn pro and then you can take over in 2027. I think that's the type of guy that they're going to be looking for.
Awesome. And folks, put it this way about all those rumors about those big fish and whatever with Syracuse at quarterback. Imagine if Syracuse told Kyle McCord heading into the 2024 season when he was transferring from Ohio State that instead of coming to Syracuse to be the unquestioned starter, he was going to be the backup quarterback. Okay, they're not going to get one of these big fish unless Steve Angeli decides to transfer out himself, which he has already said that he is coming back. Now, if he decides to change his mind, we've already seen someone at Washington try to do that, then we can have a different conversation. But right now, it is not going to happen. Now, here are the quarterbacks that Syracuse, we know publicly, has shown interest in. Marcus Stokes from West Florida, Terry Hedden from Furman, Amari Odom from Kennesaw State, Braden Atkinson from Mercer, Taron Dickens from Western Carolina. That is 5 quarterbacks I just mentioned. Yep. Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot right here. Do you believe that Syracuse is going to get 2 of those 5 quarterbacks I just mentioned, or is it going to be someone outside that group?
Man, that's tough. I think they're going to get at least one of those guys, but it's not going to be Terry Hedden because I believe he committed to New Mexico State. If I'm remembering that correctly, I think he did end up going somewhere else. But he visited earlier this week. Braden Atkinson from Mercer, his visit starts on the 7th and I think goes through the 8th or the 9th. He's interesting because he won the Jerry Rice Award, which was the best freshman at the FCS level. And so he's got 3 years of eligibility left. And so that scenario that I just talked about, which is come learn behind Angeli for a year and then take over, given how productive he was at the FCS level, would he be open to that? He just visited Notre Dame, but he didn't sign with Notre Dame. So that would almost lead me to believe that he didn't like the path for potential playing time there. So if you can convince him that sitting for a year will benefit him in the long run because he'll be more ready to take over once Angeli leaves, I think there's a possibility something like that could happen. Amari Odom is interesting. He's really athletic. I think he's got potential to be a quarterback at this level. Marcus Stokes might be the most talented of the group. For those unfamiliar, he's a former 4-star recruit out of high school. He was committed to Florida, and then a video came out of him rapping in his car in which he used a racial slur, which was part of the lyrics of the song, but he did say it on video. There was a big controversy with that. Florida drops him. He ends up going to D2 West Florida and had a really strong year last year. He ran for 10 touchdowns, threw for 30 more, over 3,000 passing yards. So he was extremely productive. And the talent is not the question. There is some baggage that comes with him, but he's also visited Appalachian State, but they just recently got a quarterback commit There were a couple other schools that he was looking at. South Florida, I think, has been connected to him. So it's going to be interesting to see what goes on with him. But I think you're going to get at least one. To say you're going to get two, maybe, because I could see Teron Dickens potentially coming and being that second guy. But it wouldn't stun me if they've got someone in their back pocket that isn't public yet either, just knowing how they operate.
All right, folks, it's going to be DJ Lagway. They're going to go out and they're going to get a big fish. Actually, DJ Lagway is the idea of a big fish. I don't know why teams are really going after him that hard. But
three-way quarterback battle at Syracuse between Steve Angeli, Dylan Raiola, and DJ Lagway. Let's do it.
Hey, you know what? You can't have enough good quarterbacks in the room. No. Hey, I'm not saying that I wouldn't want it to happen. I think it would be really, really cool. I'm just saying it ain't realistic at all. They're not going to do it. But yeah, thank you so much for the clarification on all the quarterbacks that Syracuse is going after, and hopefully they are able to land a couple of them in this portal cycle. Now, coming up, the offensive line for Syracuse football. Well, they haven't really been connected to anyone yet, but could that change? We'll talk about it next on Locked On Syracuse. Syracuse football, as of right now, the time of this recording is Wednesday, January 7th in the evening. They have not been connected, at least publicly, to one singular offensive lineman. So, Mike, I ask you this. How does Syracuse and the staff view its offensive line this upcoming season?
So, one small correction. There is one sort of public connection for offensive line in the transfer portal. They offered Cody Hornsby. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because he came to Syracuse for the 2024 season as a transfer, played a little bit, but was primarily a backup, transferred out, was at Tulsa last year, and now is back in the transfer portal, and Syracuse has re-offered. Because he's been here for a year, you don't need him to visit necessarily. He could make his decision. He knows what Syracuse is all about. He knows what it's like to play for Fran Brown. The biggest thing for him is, I did talk to him a little bit. He wants to play. It's his last year of college football. He wants to go somewhere where he knows he's going to play. And so depending on how Syracuse views, he's an interior lineman, most likely a center. Depending on how Syracuse views some of their other interior linemen will depend on, whether or not I think he would be willing to come in. But they've got 18 scholarships at offensive line right now. And I understand offensive line has been an issue. It's been an issue for decades, if we're being quite honest. So the one time it seemed to be in real good shape consistently was when Doug Marrone was the head coach. He had it for a few years, was a solid offensive line. Before and after, not so much. So I understand fans wanting to shore up the offensive line. Every time you see, Michigan's starting right tackle is going in the portal and Alabama's second string guard is going in the portal. It's like, go get all of these guys. But they've got 18 scholarships in the offensive line right now. They just hired a new offensive line coach this offseason. I have to imagine that if the conversations with the new offensive line coach, Juan Castillo, who was the offensive line coach with the Philadelphia Eagles when Donovan McNabb was with the Philadelphia Eagles. So there's a little bit of a Syracuse connection there. But because of his experience, you have to imagine that he's evaluated the offensive line, the personnel that they have, had conversations with the coaches that are still there, Fran Brown, Jeff Nixon, all those guys. And that if he thought that there were major issues, that they would have had conversations with several of those guys and said, y'all need to go. We need to go reload through the portal. They haven't done that. And I know that they like a lot of their young guys. Matthew Hahn got a lot of praise this past training camp as a true freshman. And some others that they mentioned, Skylar Harvey was performing well during training camp. Naquil Betran got some action last year, as did a few others. We know they love Byron Washington, right? So I think they're really looking for one, potentially two starting caliber players that could come in and help. I don't think they're looking for like depth. Like we need to make sure our 2 deep is okay. They're looking at 1, maybe 2 guys that can come in and start. I think center is probably the position that they'd like to bring someone in with starting experience the most. But then beyond that, if they could find potentially a tackle, although I think they like a lot of the younger tackles that they got. So I don't think you're going to see a ton of activity at offensive line. I think you might see 1, potentially 2 additions, and that'll primarily be it.
All right. Well, I agree that I don't think they necessarily need to shore up the backups. I'm more worried about the starters. And if they can get 1 or 2 in the portal, that would be great. Let's move on to more needs, though, with Syracuse football. What other position groups do you think that they're really targeting hard after?
Linebacker is a big one. They had Chris Diapolonia from Toledo on campus earlier this week. They were just connected to Georgia transfer linebacker Chris Jones, I think is his name. He's supposed to be visiting at the end of the week. So clearly adding a linebacker is something that they're looking to do. I don't think they're looking to add like 3. They obviously, love a couple of the young guys that they've got. But I think they're looking to add 1, someone that's athletic enough, that's got some versatility that, and, Diapolonia makes a lot of sense because he knows the new defense coordinator, Vince Carey. He knows his system, having played in it for the last couple of years. But then, you get a guy like Jones from Georgia, who is a former elite recruit, extremely athletic, all of those things, and looking for an opportunity to play. Could he potentially slide in? Could you have him kind of be a linebacker edge hybrid type of situation? That's something I'm keeping an eye on. Definitely defensive line is still a priority. They're looking to add, they had a guy on campus, Jartavius Flournoy from Georgia State, who played for their new edges coach at Georgia State. They had UNLV transfer Tunmai Zadelier, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Forgive me if I'm not. He was one of the best pass rushers in the G4. I think he had 6 or 7 sacks last year. And so I think edge rusher and defensive tackle are still a priority. And then, of course, we talked about quarterback, but they got 2 running backs, so I don't think you're going to see a ton more there. They've got the 1 wide receiver. They've got a tight end. Not sure if they're going to bring in a second tight end, but that could happen. But largely, I think it's defensive line and linebacker are the big priorities. And then they did have a defensive back, Vincent Ferenze from Dayton, who's a local kid, went to West Tennessee High School. They had him up on campus this past weekend for a visit. He's supposed to be heading up to Boston College to visit there this week. So I think potentially a safety is something that they could look at as well. But I don't think they need to force that. If they don't get one, they don't get one. Linebacker and defensive line, they definitely need some reinforcements there.
Awesome, Mike. Anything else you'd like to add?
Not a ton. I mean, it's been really fun, kind of watching all this. But the only other thing I'll say is I know there's been, 3 or 4 commitments, whatever the number is at this current point. And there's always impatience among fans. I want there to be like 12 commitments by now, right? Stay patient. And it's possible that there are players that are not known publicly that are signed that may not be announced until later on in the transfer portal window.
Interesting. And also, I think that the spring enrollment for Syracuse, at least for the start of the spring semester, is on January 12th, if my memory is correct on looking at the schedule recently. So that could be an important date. I mean, I know it's not when the portal closes and there's no technical date for players to officially sign, but take it for what it's worth, January 12th. So maybe there's going to be a lot of action coming up in the next few days and this weekend. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time. Where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter at McAllisterMike1. And then, of course, we have the website's Twitter account at SyracuseOn247. Same names on Instagram as well. And I am on Blue Sky, although admittedly not as active there as I am on Twitter and Instagram. And then on Facebook, you can find us at Syracuse on 24/7 Sports. you can find our Facebook page, and that's quite active as well. And the beautiful thing about the Facebook page is it's not only, covering all the stuff that goes on with Syracuse, but it covers a lot of stuff from the sports world in general, viral videos, crazy stuff from high school football, all of those types of things, major coaching changes in the NFL, etc. All of that stuff gets posted there from people at CBS Sports, people at 24/7. So you'll get lots of sports coverage if you're a sports nut by following us on Facebook.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. That is Mike McAllister, publisher for Syracuse over on 24/7 Sports. I'm Jackson Holzer, host of Locked On Syracuse. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse, and we'll see you all again soon.